Hi, my name's Meah Robertson and I'm the naturopath and founder behind Fem21, and I'm doing a little video today to give you some more information about perimenopause and metabolic dysfunction in perimenopause, which can certainly contribute to things like weight gain and a slowing of energy. And we just want to understand why this happens, what perimenopause is, and what we can do to help support our body through this phase so that we can feel our best. When some of our bodily symptoms are, showing us that our body may not be so happy at this time. And our symptoms are really important to listen to so that we can have a better understanding about what's going on in our body and how we can support it best. Symptoms, when we understand them, really allow us to do a holistic, targeted approach to help support our body. And as a naturopath, we're all about that for sure. So a couple of things to, clarify. And a lot of people are gaining a better understanding about what perimenopause actually is. But the definition of perimenopause is that time frame that happens when our hormones start to fluctuate and we're experiencing symptoms of those hormonal fluctuations prior to our period stopping. And when our period stops and has ceased completely for 12 months, that date of that anniversary of that 12 months of no period is the day of menopause. And then following that is post-menopause. So realistically, menopause is one day. Perimenopause is everything that happens in that time up until that point. And that's really what we want to focus on, is understanding, those symptoms really of metabolic dysfunction, but also, of course, we're experiencing things like hot flushes and mood changes and sleeping issues, as well as that metabolic shift, which can cause a decrease in energy and an increase in weight gain or a sluggish metabolism, where we're typically putting on weight around that midsection and our body shape starts to change. Things start to sag. Gravity takes its toll on us. And when we're lacking in estrogen, we can certainly feel that in our skin getting dry, not as plump and healthy, and we lose that elasticity in our skin. It's not as glowy, it's a bit more dull, and it thins as well. So we can see a difference on our, skin thinning. But also vaginally, our mucosal membranes thin as well in that perimenopausal phase as estrogen decreases. So perimenopause can kick in for women really between the age of 38 to 45. So if you're in that age bracket, it's most likely that you're in a perimenopausal transition or perimenopausal phase. For some women, it can last up to 10 years, but for other women, it's, shorter lived. It could only be 1 year or 2 or a couple of years. Just really varies woman to woman, just depending on your health prior to this phase. But it's almost like adolescence in reverse. So just as when, we're teenagers, we're learning and our bodies are adapting to hormonal shifts and changes, and we're ovulating irregularly as our hormones are maturing. It kind of happens in reverse in perimenopause as well. So it's kind of like a reverse adolescence. And, we can sort of feel like, we did when we were teenagers. I know because I've got teenage girls, but especially from a mood perspective, as your hormones are fluctuating, teenage girls get that sort of sassiness and that low tolerance. And I think for women in their perimenopausal phase too, they also exhibit some of those mood shifts where they can feel angry and irritable, and also switch between, you know, that sassy confidence and not taking no bullshit from nobody. And it's really due to these hormonal fluctuations that are happening at this time. So estrogen and progesterone, which are our primary hormones, are, you know, nicely fluctuating when we're ovulating regularly, and they're really a buffer to keep our metabolism and our hormones happy. And so when that's occurring throughout our menstrual life, that's great. But when we're entering into this perimenopausal phase where ovulation can be a bit irregular, then estrogen and progesterone levels aren't in such a nice ebb and flow. It sort of can, I would say, like highlight the highs and the lows of estrogen, and that can come with if you're having short cycles. So estrogen sort of bakes up. So if you imagine like an ebb and flow nicely like this, and we shrink it into a shorter cycle, it's, you know, multiple shorter cycles. We've got higher estrogen, lower progesterone, and then, you know, it fluctuates again. And then we can go into, you know, big gaps between our ovulation and our period. So instead of having a regular cycle, it can be like, you know, start to shorten and then really lengthen out. And so you might have like 3-weekly periods, like a period every 3 weeks, and then nothing for like 3 months. And so in that gap, that 3-month period when we're not ovulating, and sometimes even if you're having a regular period, you may not be ovulating. So you really need to ensure that you're ovulating. That's super important. So don't just assume because you've had a period, whatever that looks like for you, even if it's something that's like a bit weird, like it might be being a lot lighter or more brownish, it may be a sign, that period may have been a sign that you didn't ovulate that month before. But good to monitor ovulation as much as possible, either through blood tests or temperature charting or ovulation prediction kits. Monitoring your cervical mucus are all really good ways of checking for ovulation. And then in these gaps, obviously, between periods, we're not ovulating, you know, so if in that 3-month period, we might have, or 3-month cycle, sorry, we might have ovulation not occurring for, you know, 3 months, or it could be 2.5 months, or it could, you know, it could be a really long gap. And during that time, our estrogen levels aren't rising to support ovulation. So estrogen is typically low at that time when we're not ovulating. And it's these fluctuations between highs and low estrogen that then trigger these symptoms of especially hot flushes. But longer term, low estrogen is really what we associate with those menopausal symptoms, or, you know, postmenopausal symptoms, where we're seeing, you know, bone density issues, cardiovascular issues, also things like, you know, the skin issues, the hair might be a bit duller and, you know, falling out, not as thick, those sorts of things. So that's a bit of an overview of hormones in that perimenopausal phase. And, you know, of course, Fem21 is a great support. Other things like seed cycling and maca powder can also be really useful for perimenopause. But getting your nutritional health right is really important. Saying everything's important, but nutritional health is important. And one of the biggest things that we see in that perimenopausal phase, and speaking from experience here, is low iron levels. And so when you've got low iron, it certainly does affect your metabolism. So we need iron, of course, in the red blood cells to carry oxygen around the body to support our cells to metabolize. So if we're lacking in iron, and we're not doing that oxygenation of our cells and supporting that metabolism very well, then of course we're going to have that slowing down of our metabolism. And when our metabolism slows down, everything slows down, and it impacts our body from head to toe. So in our head, like externally, like our hair can fall out more frequently, our eyebrows thin, our brain gets quite foggy, and our memory's patchy, and things slow down in our brain. Our digestive system slows down, our skin thins, we've put on that midsection weight, our energy's really fatigued, everything is just slowing down. The metabolism of hormones, our liver metabolism's not as good, so you may find things like, alcohol tolerance is worse, and you're more sensitive to chemicals and things, and that's all because our metabolism in our liver is not working particularly well and not firing on all cylinders. So certainly check your iron, address it as soon as you possibly can, supplement or get an iron infusion. The faster you can get on top of it, the better, and it makes a difference, day to day, but certainly in the long term to help support your In addition to our iron levels, it's also really important to support our liver health for our metabolism in this perimenopausal phase. And really being aware of how much alcohol that you're consuming is probably the number one thing that you can do to improve your liver health. And, firstly, like looking at your tolerance point. So if you're feeling that your tolerance for alcohol is not as good as it used to be, if you're, a bit more sensitive to it, and you're not recovering after drinking alcohol, you can't drink certain types of alcohol, then it's just showing that your liver's under more pressure than it perhaps was in the past when you were younger and you weren't dealing with an extra load of hormones fluctuating in your body. And so just being aware of that, potentially reducing your alcohol consumption, changing the type of alcohol that you're drinking. Also consider, having an alcohol-free period. All of that can help reduce the load on the liver. Also eliminating chemicals from your environment, what you're doing in terms of skincare, deodorants, shampoos, moisturizers, perfumes, air fresheners, cleaning products, and any chemicals that you're exposed to that you can one, be aware of, and then minimize, swap to natural products. That can make a big difference in your liver load. So that's important. Also looking at our thyroid health and our stress levels play a part in this perimenopausal phase, and how we're metabolising our hormones, how much inflammation is in our body, and it's it makes a big difference. Stress, so if we say iron, liver health, stress, we'll call that number 3, our adrenal function, plays a big part in this perimenopausal phase. Often you'll see women storing fat midsection when their cortisol levels are elevated. Now, this is like a natural protection that the body does, because it's like storing for to get us through this stressful period. It's part of that fight or flight response. Our insulin sensitivity changes when we're stressed as well. And stress can be emotional, so, coming from things like anxiety, social, you're worried about your kids, financial stress, all of those things that cause these emotional fluctuations, and that stress in raising our cortisol impacts our body physically. And then we've also got physical stress as well, so things like exercise, how much exercise that we're doing, that also can impact our cortisol, how much sleep we're having, and if we're having broken sleep due to hot flushes, or you've just got a busy racing mind, our circadian rhythms are out, that lack of sleep definitely impacts our adrenal function and our cortisol levels longer term. And so when our cortisol levels aren't great and they're out of whack, then and our adrenals are suffering, then it really will impact us through that perimenopausal phase and postmenopause. So a really interesting little tip that I heard from another naturopath at a conference I went to recently was when your ovaries switch off, your adrenal glands are like your ovaries that continue to regulate our hormones, especially progesterone post-menopause. So if we are switching off our ovaries post-menopause, we really want to ensure we're supporting our adrenals through that process and into our post-menopausal phase. Now, our adrenal function also is impacted by caffeine, and so minimizing the amount of caffeine that you're having, ensuring that you're getting a good night's sleep, and really being conscious about processing and doing things that help with your stress response, whether that's regular walks, doing some therapies, some flower essences, journaling. All of those things can be helpful, and I know personally I've found those things helpful for my stress levels and regulating my cortisol. Also, as a side note, things like burnout that affects your adrenals longer term can be driven by viruses. So if your immune system's run down and depleted, especially the Epstein-Barr virus or glandular fever, then that can affect your energy levels long term. So to support your adrenals nutritionally and herbally, some things that you can do that can be quite helpful: a good quality B complex, so a good multi, preferably with methylated Bs in there. That's a really good daily just to help support your adrenals. Also, vitamin C, N-acetylcysteine or NAC. And I would also recommend zinc and magnesium at night for adrenal nourishment. And zinc's also important for our hormonal health, so is magnesium. It's also good for our immune health as well, zinc especially. So if you're coming off the back of some of those viruses that run down your immune system, or you're dealing with them, and that can be not just the glandular fever, Epstein-Barr virus, but long COVID. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but I just did. Even the cold sore virus, if you've had shingles, any of these viruses that live in your system long term, your immune system is on higher alert trying to manage them and keep them suppressed. And so that requires energy. And when you get sick, there's been a lot of flus and sickness and things like that have come around this year, and your immune system then has to put more energy and resources into fighting that acute sickness. Then what it gets depleted when it comes to controlling and suppressing those chronic longer term viruses that live in your system, which can reawaken. So unfortunately, it's not just you just have it once and then you're done. You can get this reoccurring long-term effect, especially from glandular fever and chronic fatigue, and we see that link. So yeah, that's a thing. And then also thyroid health, super important. So our thyroid, controls our body's metabolism. Nutritionally speaking, we need iodine for our thyroid to work efficiently. Also selenium, iron, of course, as well, B6 and zinc. But iodine is the number one. Tyrosine is also really important for our thyroid hormones, but typically we get tyrosine if we're having plenty of protein in our diet. It's one of our amino acids, so you should not have a problem with being tyrosine deficient, but I do see people being iodine deficient. So, you can check that through doing a urine test and addressing that through supplementation, adding more iodine-rich foods into your diet. Even just iodized salt can be a good start. But any products from the sea will naturally contain iodine. So seaweed, fish, oysters, and just, good quality sources so that you're not getting any other heavy metals or toxins with those foods. And speaking of foods, let's talk a little bit about insulin resistance in perimenopause. And I know as a woman, when you get hormonal, sometimes you crave sugar, and I do that. And unfortunately, you don't always resist those sugar cravings, and just being mindful about what type of sugar that you're having when you're having it. And if you're exercising and having plenty of protein and fiber in your diet and good fats, then you're having some sugar in your diet or carbohydrates is not going to be the end of the world. Sometimes if you're having a really high protein and high fat diet and you're really low in carbohydrates, that can contribute to fatigue as well, because your body does need carbohydrates to produce energy. But if you've got stored fat, then following like that keto paleo style diet, then you'll tap into that stored fat and burn that for energy. So long as your hormones are good, you're not too stressed, and your liver's functioning well, all of that will work for you to lose weight efficiently. So keep all of those things in mind if you're struggling in this perimenopausal phase with your weight and with your metabolic health. And think the two sort of go together. Low energy and an increase in weight, hormonal imbalances. So supporting yourself at this time makes a big difference to set you up for a better transition through perimenopause and come out the other side. It's all a really natural transition. We shouldn't be afraid of it as women. We're meant to go through it. We all go through it, and the more we talk about it and support one another and help each other out about what's worked for one person may not necessarily work for somebody else. But having the conversation around our hormonal health and perimenopause and how we're feeling at this time is important. And you'll pick up some tips, and implementing them can really make a big difference of how you're feeling long term and set you up for, of course, a healthier, happier postmenopausal time in those elderly years. So thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this video.